The sky above Verelion Prime was no longer blue, it was ash and fire. The peaceful world, once home to ancient libraries, glowing rivers and songbirds that shimmered in the twilight, now screamed under the weight of invasion. Towers of crystal that had stood for 1,000 years cracked and fell. The ground trembled with the force of explosions. Strange ships hovered above, monstrous and silent, shaped like insects carved from black metal. They had no name in the Verelion language, for no one had imagined such horror before. But all across the galaxy, survivors of dead worlds called them one thing: the Devourers. These biomechanical monsters moved from system to system, destroying everything in their path, leaving only dust. The Verelions had never known war. They had no armies, no fleets, no weapons. Their people were thinkers, dreamers, builders of harmony. When the Devourers arrived, the Verelions offered peace. The answer was fire. Lari, a young historian, ran through the ruined streets, clutching a damaged data tablet to her chest. Around her, families huddled in the ruins, trembling. The great towers of Songlight were gone. The sky pulsed with the glow of orbital beams as more Devourer ships descended. She ducked into the last working communications chamber beneath the Hall of Wisdom. Her elders had fallen, her city was lost, but her fingers still moved with purpose as she tapped into the ancient beacon system. With shaking hands, she sent a signal, an SOS, the first in their world's history. It carried no words of hate or vengeance, only a plea. "We are dying. Please help us." The message was fired into deep space. It traveled beyond known systems, across the quiet dark. The Verelions had never traveled far beyond their star. They knew other species existed, but they had never reached out. Now, it was their only chance. La'ari stood alone in the dark, her tablet silent, her city crumbling above. Far away on the edge of Saturn's moon Titan, the UHS Resolute floated in orbit. Inside its steel heart, Commander Alina Drake studied the stars. Her short-cut hair was dark, her expression sharper than the knife at her side. She was a decorated war leader, known for survival and stubbornness. She had seen too many battles, lost too many good soldiers, and yet she still returned to command because she could not walk away when others were in danger. The distress signal hit the Resolute's long-range receivers without warning. Unfamiliar coding, unknown origin. But the raw data was clear. Massive casualties, a planet under siege, a threat of extinction. Her crew gathered around, reading the translated message. A low murmur spread through the bridge. The Verelions hadn't called for humans. They didn't even seem to know who humans were. But something in that message reached deep into Alina. Drake's bones. "Plot a course," she ordered. "We're going." One of her officers hesitated. Lieutenant Greaves, young and brave, looked uneasy. "That's the outer fringe, Commander. That's deep in enemy zones. We don't even know. Who sent this? It could be a trap." Drake turned to face him. Her voice was quiet but hard as steel. "And if it's not, then an entire world dies while we sit here doing nothing." She stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the crew. "We are not the kind of people who ignore cries for help. We're going." End of discussion. The engines of the Resolute roared to life. As the stars shifted around them and Titan faded into the black, Alina sat back in her chair and looked out the viewport. She didn't know who the Verelions were. She didn't know if they could be saved. But she knew this. Someone out there had screamed for help, and someone had to answer, and if humanity was going, they wouldn't go quietly. They would go armed. They would go united. And they would show the Devourers that even in the cold silence of deep space, a human warfleet meant fire. The stars blinked in slow silence as the human fleet raced through space, their engines burning white against the void. Commander Alina Drake stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her eyes fixed on the growing swirl of red markers blooming on the tactical screen. Behind her, the rest of the fleet followed, a dozen warships, all armored in black and gray, built not for peace but for survival. The human fleet was not the biggest in the galaxy, nor the most advanced, but it had something far more dangerous: experience. Every captain, every crew member had survived wars that burned entire systems. And now, with no treaty, no deal, and no promise of reward, they flew toward a dying world because someone had cried out, and humanity had answered. The closer they got, the more the transmissions worsened. Static grew heavier. Echoes of destruction filtered through. Screaming voices, bursts of language full of panic, images of Varelian cities falling in slow motion. One visual clip played, over and over on the bridge screen. A massive, insect-like ship descending with tendrils of black energy drilling into the surface. The cities cracked. The land burned red. Varelian Prime was breaking. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The stars stretched back to normal, and then the horror hit them. Dead satellites floated in the void, like shattered bones. The planet's orbit was surrounded by husks of ships and debris fields glowing with heat, and around Varelion Prime hung a cloud of devourer vessels, black, spiked, and hungry. Drake's hands tightened around the edge of her command chair. "God help them," she whispered. "They're already inside the atmosphere." The enemy fleet moved like one creature. No formation, no signals, no visible pilots. Just perfect, silent coordination, as if they shared a single mind. Their ships weren't built. They were grown. They breathed. They pulsed. And when they noticed the human arrival, they reacted immediately. The black cloud shifted. Ships peeled off and surged toward the newcomers. They didn't send messages or warnings. The Devourers never did. "Incoming contacts, 37. Moving fast," said Greaves, now at weapons control. "ETA, 30 seconds. "Battle stations," said Drake. "Arm the entire fleet. Tell the Hammerclaw and Daggerpoint to flank." "Right. We're holding the center." The Warfleet moved like wolves in space, fast and hungry. The first Devourer wave came in hissing silence, their weapons glowing green. But the Resolute's defense turrets were already online. Human railguns fired glowing slugs at impossible speeds. Explosions bloomed in space like silent fireworks. The Hammerclaw dropped under an enemy cruiser and fired upward, cracking its underbelly. The Daggerpoint unleashed torpedoes that split into dozens of screaming shards. The front of the human formation lit up with bursts of white and red as both sides collided. Even with all their firepower, it was hard. The Devourers didn't fly like normal ships. They twisted in ways that bent physics. They ignored damage that would cripple anything else. They didn't retreat, didn't hesitate. They simply attacked. One human frigate, the Mayflower, was torn apart by 3 of the creatures pulled open like meat. But for every human ship they struck, they paid in fire. The Resolute's main cannon lit up and cut straight through the thick armor of a Devourer command pod. The enemy exploded into molten fragments which spun in all directions like flaming rain. Drake gave orders calmly, but her knuckles were white on the armrest. "We buy time. That's the mission. We punch a hole. We get to the surface. If there's anything left down there, we're going to find it." The fleet pressed forward, carving a path through the black swarm. Explosions rocked them, shields failed. One of their support ships spun off course, burning, but the rest kept pushing. Devourer reinforcements flowed in from the dark edges of the system like blood into a wound. But so did humanity's answer. A hidden carrier ship, the Vanguard Dawn, uncloaked and released a squadron of Valkyrie-class fighters. They screamed through the mess like sparks, diving between enemy cruisers, firing pulse bombs into exposed joints. Below, the surface of Varelion came into view. The capital was nearly gone, just ruins and flame, but a small signal beacon still pulsed. Laurie's transmission still alive. "There," said Drake. "Target that location. Get a dropship ready, I'm going down." "Commander," said Greaves, startled. "You're going planet-side?" "I gave the order to answer this call," she said. "I'll be damned if I don't look them in the eyes." As the battle raged above, the Resolute's drop bay opened, and a gunmetal pod streaked down through the flames carrying hope, and a human war leader with fire in her heart. The dropship screamed through the Varelian sky, trailing smoke as enemy fire grazed its hull. Inside, Commander Alina Drake braced herself, gripping the safety bar with one hand and a pulse rifle with the other. The world below was a storm of ash and glowing ruins. Buildings lay in pieces, their sharp silver bones jutting out of the scorched ground like broken teeth. Fires burned in every direction, and the air shimmered with heat and dust. As the dropship descended, it shook hard. Something exploded nearby, and alarms blared. But the pilot, Sergeant Clem, kept control. His face was calm, but sweat ran down his temple. "We'll get you to the beacon," he said, shouting over the noise. "But I can't land. Too hot. You'll have to jump." Alina nodded, her jaw set. At 10 meters up, the side doors burst open, and wind roared in. Without a word, she leapt into the chaos, her armor absorbing the impact as she hit the street in a low crouch. The dropship rose again, dodging debris as it flew off to avoid enemy fire. She stood alone now in the ruins of a once beautiful city, with devourers crawling across the skyline like giant insects. Smoke filled the air. The sky, once full of light towers and floating bridges, was now clogged with black clouds and falling ash. The beacon signal was coming from beneath a collapsed dome nearby, what had once been the Hall of Wisdom. Alina ran, her boots crunching, over shattered glass and alien stone. Her rifle hummed as it charged, ready to fire at anything that moved. She passed the remains of statues carved in flowing, elegant shapes, scholars, dreamers, artists, now broken and burned. It made her heart tighten. These people weren't soldiers. They had never been built for war, and yet someone here had chosen to fight even in the face of extinction. She heard movement ahead and froze, raising her weapon. But instead of a devourer, a thin figure stepped out from behind a fallen column. It was Laurie. Dust covered her robes, and a cut bled down the side of her head, but her eyes were wide with shock and hope. She stared at the human before her, armored, armed, and real. "You came," she whispered. Alina lowered her weapon and stepped forward. "We heard your call. We came to help." Laurie didn't speak for a moment, just stared. Behind her, a small group of survivors peeked from a tunnel entrance. Children, elders, all exhausted and afraid. "We thought no one would come," Laurie said. "We didn't even know who would hear us. We just hoped." Alina nodded, scanning the skies. "You held on longer than most. We're here now, but it's not over. We need to move your people. The battle up there isn't going our way." A loud screech tore through the air, and both women turned. From above, a devourer scout dropped onto a nearby roof, its legs clicking, its red eyes glowing like burning coals. It spotted them and shrieked, leaping forward with terrifying speed. Alina didn't flinch. She raised her rifle and fired 3 times. The first 2 rounds tore into its carapace, slowing it. The third hit its eye and detonated, blowing the creature's head apart. In a spray of black fluid, its body skidded to the ground in front of them, twitching. The survivors gasped. Laurie looked at the smoking rifle, then back at Alina with wide eyes. "You fight monsters with lightning," she said softly. "We fight monsters with whatever works," Alina replied. "Come on, we'll get you out." She moved quickly, helping the injured walk, guiding the group toward an open square where a signal beacon could reach the orbiting fleet. The streets were not safe. More devourers stalked the ruins. At one point, 3 of them came out of the mist ahead, their bodies glowing green. Alina dropped to one knee, covering the group. She took them down one by one, her shots precise, never wasting a bullet. Behind her, the Varelians watched in stunned silence. They had never seen death brought so swiftly to their enemy. They had never seen someone stand tall in the face of the end. By the time they reached the square, more human dropships had arrived, sweeping low and firing at devourers on the ground. One ship landed, its side doors sliding open. Marines rushed out, securing the area. A medic checked Laurie's head. Children were lifted into the dropship one by one. And through it all, Alina stood guard, her rifle still in her hands, her armor covered in scratches and blood. Laurie stood beside her. "I thought we were alone," she said quietly. "But then the sky opened, and you fell like thunder." Alina gave her a faint smile, "We're not gods," she said. "Just humans. But sometimes that's enough." And behind them, the war in the stars still burned. The battlefield above Virelion turned red as the human Warfleet broke through the second enemy line. From the bridge of the HSS Titan, Admiral Rourke stood tall, staring at the display of the unfolding chaos. The enemy swarm was massive, thousands of devourer vessels, shaped like jagged shells and living bone, moved in eerie silence, pulsing with a sick green light. Their sheer numbers filled the void. The human fleet, though smaller, fought with strategy and speed. Rourke's voice echoed over comms as he ordered squadrons to flank left and deploy plasma charges through the enemy's blind arc. Fighters darted between larger capital ships, launching missiles and cutting through the dark with bursts of light. Devourer cruisers responded, spitting acid beams that tore through shielding. One human frigate exploded to Rourke's right, a flower of white fire that died quickly in the void. He didn't flinch. He had already accepted losses. This was a fight for survival, not safety. "Tell the Valhalla to push forward," he said to his second-in-command. "They've got the payload. We break the swarm now, or we lose Virelion." Far below, on the planet's surface, Commander Alina Drake watched the sky flicker with explosions. Her team had secured the survivors in a hidden chamber beneath a half-buried temple. Lari stood beside her, silent, listening to the thunder rumble from above. "Will they win?" Lari asked. Alina didn't answer right away. Her eyes scanned the sky where falling ships streaked like fireballs. "They'll hold," she said finally. "That's what humans do." A new sound filled the air then, piercing whine. Alina turned as a swarm of devourer drones surged toward them, scuttling over walls, crawling through rubble, their eyes glowing. There was no time to call for backup. Alina turned and ran back into the chamber. "Seal the doors. Get the civilians deeper inside," she shouted. Her team of Marines spread out, taking positions. Pulse rifles hummed. The first wave of drones hit like a wave of steel and claws. The chamber shook with battle cries and gunfire. One Marine fell to a slash across the chest. Another fired a grenade into the swarm, blasting drones into smoke and sparks. Alina fought. At the front, her blade slicing through one drone before turning and shooting another point blank. She didn't stop moving. She didn't let fear win. Behind her, Lari stared in awe as the humans fought like storms. In orbit, the Valhalla pushed through the devourer lines. It was a dreadnought, massive and scarred, its hull patched from older wars. On board, Captain Moreno barked orders while the crew prepared the solar spear, a planet-sized energy lance capable of cutting through even devourer hive ships. The Valhalla took hit after hit. Shields flickered. Fires broke out on lower decks. Still, it moved forward. Finally, the spear reached full charge. "Target the Queen vessel," Moreno shouted. In the distance, the largest enemy ship hovered like a black moon, a living city of teeth and wings. The Valhalla aimed and fired. The beam tore across space, white-hot and blazing. It slammed into the hive ship, cutting deep. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship cracked down the middle. Energy burst from within like a supernova. The entire enemy formation stuttered. Without their queen, the devourers began to falter. On the ground, Alina felt it instantly. The drones paused mid-attack. Some twitched, others simply stopped. The humans didn't wait. They pushed forward, clearing the area. As the smoke cleared, silence returned. Alina stood in the wreckage, panting, her armor scorched and her hands shaking slightly. Lari stepped forward, placing a hand on her arm. "You killed the hive mind?" she asked. Alina shook her head. "Not me. Us." In the sky, the human fleet pressed their advantage, driving the broken enemy back into retreat. The devourers had never expected such resistance. They had never tasted a defense that fought with such fury, even in the face of death. The humans didn't just defend, they hunted. Admiral Rourke's voice echoed again across the command channels. "Phase 2, drive them out. No retreat." The fleet moved as one. Like a tide of fire, they swept across the stars, forcing the enemy to flee. For the first time in weeks, the people of Virelion saw a sky not filled with death but with hope. The battle was not over, but the tide had turned. Above them, the HSS Titan held its position, scarred but unbroken. And in the shadows of a ruined temple, a human soldier stood quietly, her armor steaming, surrounded by alien allies who now knew why the galaxy had once feared the silence of Earth. Because when humans come, when they truly come, they do not arrive as messengers. They arrive as thunder. The stars were still burning from the battle above Virelion, but there was no time to rest. The enemy had scattered but not broken. From deep space came another signal, encrypted, faint, desperate. It wasn't from the Devourers. It was from a far system known in human maps only as Grid 9K, a dark sector avoided by most explorers. The message was the same as before, a repeating SOS, alien in tone but clear in meaning. But this time it included something new, a human voice screaming in the background. Admiral Rourke played the transmission again and again in his quarters. The scream wasn't just panic, it was pain. He leaned forward, eyes dark. "That's one of ours," he said, half to himself. Word spread fast through the fleet. A human was out there, maybe a prisoner, maybe bait, but it didn't matter. Humanity didn't leave its own behind. Rourke stood before the assembled captains and commanders of the surviving fleet, his uniform stained and his voice sharp. "We hit them again, we follow the trail. No one stops us now." There was no argument. The Devourers had poked a sleeping monster, and the monster was now fully awake. The human Warfleet jumped again, riding the scars left in space by their enemies. Ships were patched mid-flight, some barely holding together. Fuel was low, weapons were damaged, but no one complained. The humans moved forward, led by instinct fury and the iron will to protect their own. Commander Alina Drake was aboard the HSS Revenant, watching as her ship prepared for another clash. The engineers were working non-stop, the medics still, treating the wounded, but morale burned hot like a forge. She stood beside Laurie, now wearing light armor and carrying a scanner. Laurie had asked to join, not out of debt, but by choice. "You saved us," she said quietly. "Now let me help you do the same for whoever's crying out." Alina nodded. She didn't believe in heroes. She believed in action. The journey to Grid 9K took hours, but every moment felt stretched. The space there was cold, darker than usual. The stars were distant, quiet. And then the fleet saw it. A system swallowed in shadow. Debris fields floated like graveyards. Wrecked ships, torn moons, fragments of destroyed civilizations drifted in silence. At the center was a single planet, gray and broken, its surface scarred with deep trenches and twisted towers. Orbiting it was a massive devourer nest, larger than the hive ship destroyed over Virelion. It looked like a shell made from stolen steel and living bone, pulsing with hive energy, and beneath it, a cage. Inside that cage was a small, flickering, human signal. They had kept someone alive. Rourke didn't wait. "Deploy all units," he said. "We get them out or we die trying." The fleet moved fast. Fighters broke from the dreadnoughts, swarming like hornets. Battleships launched coordinated strikes, aiming to open a hole in the hive's defenses. The enemy was ready this time. From the hive nest came new weapons, spiked ships shaped like spears, controlled by a single hive mind. They moved with impossible speed, dancing between shots, ramming into human ships with suicidal fury. Explosions filled the black. Fires spread in the void. A destroyer cracked in two. Screams echoed over the comms, but the humans did not fall back. If anything, they grew fiercer. Alina's drop team was already diving toward the surface, weaving through anti-air fire and cloud storms. The Revenant dropped them directly above the cage. She and her Marines fought through trenches of infected soil, swarms of crawling drones, and acid rain that burned through armor. Laurie stayed close, scanning for life signs. "There!" She pointed. Beneath a dome of metal and bone, a chamber pulsed with heat. They blasted their way in. What they found froze even Alina. One human, a pilot, barely conscious, half-starved, wired into a machine. His eyes opened when he saw them. He smiled, weak but real. "Took you long enough," he said. Alina didn't smile back. "We're not done yet." The hive nest began to tremble. The devourers knew the humans were inside. They sent everything. From the sky, black rain poured. Monsters with wings and fire in their bellies dropped like meteors. But the humans fought in the rain. They carried, their own like a banner. Gunships came to extract the squad. One was shot down, crashing nearby. Another made it in. Alina shoved the wounded pilot inside, blood on her hand, smoke in her lungs. As they lifted off, the hive began to crack. Rourke had ordered the Valhalla to fire the solar spear again, straight into the heart of the enemy base. The beam roared, like judgment, splitting the nest apart. It crumbled in flame and silence. What remained of the devourers began to flee. And for the second time, the humans didn't just survive. They won. Not by numbers, not by luck, but by fury, grit, and the refusal to ever leave one of their own behind. The fleet drifted in the quiet after the storm, its ships scarred, blackened, some barely holding together. But inside, the people were alive. They were bruised, burned, and exhausted, but alive. On the Valhalla, Admiral Rourke stood on the bridge, staring at the wreckage of the devourer hive through the main display. Around him, the crew moved like ghosts, cleaning up, tending wounds, sealing cracks. Behind them, a planet still smoldered with the fires of the battle. The rescued pilot, now resting in the medical bay, was stable. His name was Jason Cross, an exploration scout gone missing nearly 2 years earlier. No one had expected to find him. No one had expected him to survive. But he had, and that alone meant everything. Across the human ships, a silent message pulsed from ship to ship, not from command, but from the crews, the soldiers, the engineers, and the medics. The message was simple. We came for one of us, and we won. On the Revenant, Commander Alina Drake sat beside Laurie in the med bay. Laurie had taken a shrapnel wound to her arm but refused full sedation. Her eyes were locked on the ceiling, breathing slowly. "That thing we fought," she whispered. "It feeds on pain. It keeps prisoners not just to study them, but to suffer from them." Alina didn't answer. She just nodded. The thought of what that pilot had endured in that metal tomb burned hotter than plasma, and yet, somehow he had held on. That strength was something more than human. It was something universal, and it had saved them. The Warfleet stayed in orbit for 2 more days, sweeping through the debris fields, hunting any remaining devourer scouts. On the 3rd day, a ripple in the void appeared. A large alien convoy, not of warships but of refugees. At least 5 species were among them, each having followed the signal the humans had answered first. These species had sent the original distress call, small, forgotten civilizations crushed or scattered by the devourers. They had never expected a response, especially not from humanity. Their ships were old and barely functional. Their eyes were wide with fear as they saw the hulking forms of human dreadnoughts and battleships drift in silence around the ruined hive world. One alien captain dared open a channel to the human flagship. "Did you destroy it?" she asked, voice shaking. Rourke didn't smile, didn't raise his voice. He only nodded once. "It's gone. You're safe now." That single sentence traveled across all the ships. It echoed in translation systems. It spread like a new beginning. The refugees were invited aboard the fleet. Supplies were shared. Engineers helped repair failing reactors. Medics treated injuries. Soldiers stood guard not with weapons raised but with hands outstretched. Some of the aliens wept. Others watched in stunned silence. La'ari helped translate where she could, her wound already healing. "I told you," she whispered to a younger, alien child clutching her sleeve. "The humans came because they don't leave people behind, not even strangers." For the first time in cycles, that child smiled. The war wasn't over. Rourke knew that. The Devourers had more hives somewhere out there, more nests buried in the edges of known space. But now they knew something they hadn't before. Humanity responded. Not with fear, but with fire. Not with peace talks, but with precision strikes. If the Devourers returned, they would not face a weak race begging for mercy. They would face Warfleets forged in desperation and fury. They would face soldiers like Alina, who charged through acid rain to rescue a stranger. They would face leaders, like Rourke, who burned hives to dust to protect one pilot. And they would face the simple truth. Humanity didn't start the war, but they would finish it. On the final night before the fleet departed the broken system, the ships dimmed their lights. A moment of silence was held for the lost, both human and alien. Aboard every vessel, voices read the names of the fallen. Some names came from Earth, some were alien, but all were honored. And above the ruined world, the stars burned a little, brighter as if remembering. As the fleet prepared to jump, Jason Cross stood once more on the bridge, wrapped in medical gear, weak but upright. He looked out the viewing window, his voice hoarse. "Why'd you come?" he asked Rourke. The Admiral didn't turn. He just spoke softly. "Because you screamed, and we heard you." Cross nodded. "Good answer." Then, in the dark of space, the Warfleet blinked out in a ripple of light, leaving behind only ruins and a warning etched across the stars. If you call for help, humanity will come. And if you hurt one of theirs, they will bring the storm. Far beyond the edge of the last battle, across quiet systems and drifting nebulae, the stories began to spread. In space stations where traders met, in refugee colonies lit by flickering solar lamps, in the hidden archives of ancient alien empires, whispers moved faster than light. They told of a signal, a cry for help meant for anyone, meant for everyone. But the only ones who answered were the humans, not with questions, not with delay, with ships, guns, and fury. People called it many names. The Warfleet of Earth, the silent answer, the storm from Sol. But one truth stayed the same. When the call came, humanity came roaring. In the halls of the Zorelian High Chamber, where prideful nobles once sneered at humans as backward savages, now silence ruled. A grand commander stood before the court, describing how the humans had destroyed an entire hive nest with brutal precision. They did not negotiate. They did not ask for permission. They acted, and now, the Devourers fear. Around him, old voices trembled. For centuries, the Devourers had haunted the dark. Now they had tasted fear. On a jungle moon, far from any civilized world, a young alien child ran through the thick trees, holding a carved wooden toy. Small, shaped like a human ship, with little marks burned in as weapons. She called it Stormblade, after one of the Earth ships seen during the rescue. Her parents watched her play, tears in their eyes because she had not laughed since they lost their home to the swarm. Now she did. Across the galaxy, thousands like her felt the same spark. For the first time in generations, hope had a face, and it looked human. Back in Sol system, Earth did not celebrate. There were no grand parades, no fireworks. But across the planet, people stood still. They watched as names scrolled across networks and skies, the names of those who didn't come back. In a school in New York, children wrote letters to the families of the fallen. In Nairobi, a monument was built not of polished stone but of broken ship fragments, welded into the shape of a reaching hand. It was not beauty that mattered. It was truth. And the truth was simple. Someone out there cried for help and Earth answered. Admiral Rourke was called to speak before the United Terran Council. Not to defend his actions. No one asked him to, but to explain. He stood tall, uniform still, smelling of ozone and dust. He did not read from a screen, he did not prepare a speech, he only said, "They called. We answered. We did what any of us would have done." And with that, he walked out. No applause followed. It didn't need to. Humanity understood. Later that night, Under the stars of Luna Base, Commander Alina Drake stood at the memorial wall, tracing a finger across the name of her fallen engineer, Ramirez. He had held a breach long enough for the evac shuttle to escape. She remembered his jokes, his bad coffee, his promise to finally grow a garden after this mission. "I'll do it for you," she whispered. "One day." Behind her, Laurie approached, arm still in a sling. The two said nothing at first, but, in silence, something passed between them. Understanding, respect, and something that felt like the beginning of healing. Laurie finally said, "When you humans come, you don't come to win. You come to protect. That's what makes you different." Alina gave a sad smile. "We try." And somewhere, far from Earth, on a dark station in the void, a signal was intercepted by an ancient machine long thought dead. It was weak. It was desperate. Another cry for help, a scream in the night. No one else heard it. But Earth did, and quietly, without announcement, ships began to move. Repairs halted. Engines ignited. Crews returned to stations, weapons charged. No banners, no declarations. Just duty. Because the galaxy had learned a new rule. When the void screams, the humans listen. And when they come, they do not come alone. They come with fury, with fire, and with the quiet promise that no cry for help goes unanswered, not while Earth is still breathing.